I am going to be reading a short article that was published today, February 29th, 2024, that was published in France24.com, a news site. On January 26th, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, while stopping short of ordering an immediate halt to the war in Gaza, said Israel must, quote, prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of the Genocide Convention. I fail to see how such an operation could be consistent with the binding provisional measures issued by the International Court of Justice, unquote, Volker Turk told the UN Human Rights Council. The International Court of Justice said Israel must facilitate urgently needed humanitarian aid to the Palestinian territory under relentless bombardment and siege since an attack in Israel by Hamas militants on October 7th. Quote, the prospect of an Israeli ground attack on Rafah would take the nightmare being inflicted on people in Gaza into a new dimension, unquote, said Turk. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the army will launch a ground invasion of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, where an estimated 1.4 million Palestinian civilians have sought refuge. The war began after the October 7th attack by Hamas, which killed about 1,160 people in Israel, according to an AFP tally of Israeli figures. The Palestinian militants also took hostages, 130 of whom remain in Gaza. Israel's retaliatory bombardment and ground offensive in Gaza have killed more than 30,000 people in under 5 months, most of them women and children, according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry. Turk repeated that the Hamas attacks on Israel in October were, quote, shocking, profoundly traumatizing, and totally unjustifiable, unquote. He continued, the killing of civilians, reports of torture and sexual violence inflicted by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, and the holding of hostages since that time are appalling and entirely wrong, he said. And so is the brutality of the Israeli response, he added, calling it, quote-unquote, carnage. Quote, there appears to be no bounds to, no words to capture the horrors that are unfolding before our eyes in Gaza, unquote, said Turk. We must go after Hamas. Meirav Eilon-Shahar, Israel's ambassador in Geneva, told the Human Rights Council it was an, quote, echo chamber where the human rights of Israelis and Jews mean nothing, unquote. She was accompanied by Aviva Siegel and Raz Ben Ami, 2 Israeli hostages who were freed by Hamas in November. Their husbands are still being held in Gaza. Quote, these hauls should have been a symbol of hope for Aviva and Raz and all the hostages that the world would act for their human rights and for their release. Yet, unfortunately, they have become a mere footnote in the discourse of this council, unquote, said Eilon-Shahar. Quote, you think if Israel stops this war today, Hamas will return all our hostages tomorrow? Unquote, she said, addressing Turk. We must go after Hamas or they will continue to come after us, unquote. The health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza said 104 people were killed and more than 750 injured after Israeli soldiers opened fire on civilians at an aid distribution point earlier Thursday. Palestinian ambassador Ibrahim Kraishi interjected to ask Eilon-Shahar what she thought of the incident. Quote, are these human shields? Are these Hamas combatants? Unquote, asked Kraishi, who received sustained applause. I will briefly include the transcript from the video of the same name that this article references. He said, let me be absolutely clear and issue yet another stark warning. The prospect of an Israeli ground assault on Rafah would take the nightmare being inflicted on people in Gaza to a new dimension. Over 1.5 million people are sheltering in Rafah, despite continuing bombardment, and it has become Gaza's humanitarian hub. A ground assault would incur potentially massive loss of life, additional risk of atrocity crimes, new displacement to another unsafe location, and sign a death warrant for any hope of effective humanitarian aid. For my part, I fail to see how such an operation could be consistent with the binding provisional measures that were issued by the International Court of Justice. Today, the total number of people killed has exceeded 30,000, and tens of thousands of people are missing. many presumed buried under the rubble of their homes. This is carnage. This has been a brief read of an article published today, February 29th, 2024, on France24.com. Link in the description.